"What are you doing with my car?" That's what I yelled at 6:15 on a Saturday morning, barefoot in my driveway, watching a tow truck hook up to my sedan like it was stolen property. The driver didn't apologize. He just shoved a handwritten invoice in my face. $275 cash. Only no tax ID, no company address. Just a blurry logo that looked like it came from a free clip art site, and the reason HOA violation. Which was funny, because my neighborhood didn't have an HOA. That was the moment I realized something was seriously off in Wellington Heights. The driver was mid-40s, gut hanging over his jeans baseball cap backwards, acting like this was just another day at work. "Sir, step back," he said without even looking at me. "You're in violation." I snapped violation of what I'm parked in front of my own house. He handed me a piece of paper printed on cheap copy stock. Wellington Heights Homeowners Association Overnight Parking Rules. The font was Comic Sans. I'm an accountant. Fonts matter to me. I'd read every single document when I bought this house 6 months ago. There was no HOA, no board, no bylaws. Then she appeared. Pink velour tracksuit, tight ponytail, clipboard, clutched like a weapon. "Good morning, Mr. Hayes," she said with that fake suburban smile that always hides something venomous. "I'm Karen Kellerman, HOA president. HOA president. Of an HOA that doesn't exist." She said I'd ignored a community notice on the lamppost about new parking restrictions. I stared at her, half awake, half furious. "You're telling me I'm supposed to check a lamppost every morning for made-up rules?" She didn't flinch. "We maintain standards here. If you refuse to comply, there will be consequences." Consequences. I repeated, grabbing the paper from her clipboard. It was garbage. No address, no signatures, nothing official. I pulled out my phone and started taking photos, the truck, the driver, the invoice, her smug face. "You can't do that," she hissed. I said, "Actually, I can. Public street, no expectation of privacy. This is evidence." That word evidence must have hit a nerve because she stepped closer, lowered her voice, and said, "People who don't respect this neighborhood don't last long here." Then she turned and walked away, perfume trailing behind her like poison. I stood there shaking half from cold, half from rage. My car was safe, but something inside me wasn't. I went back inside, made coffee, sat down at the kitchen table, and did what I do best. I opened a spreadsheet. Column A, date and time. Column B, description. Column C, evidence. I wasn't angry anymore. I was methodical. By the time my second cup went cold, I'd confirmed everything I suspected. The towing company didn't exist in the Illinois Business Registry. The HOA wasn't registered with the county. It was all fake, a scam hiding behind neighborhood rules. That afternoon, I walked next door to talk to my neighbor Vernon, a retired man who always seemed to be gardening. He invited me in, poured coffee, and when I told him what happened, he sighed like he'd been waiting for someone to ask. "She got you too," he said. 8 months ago, she fined me $50 for having grass too high. Said it violated HOA standards. I paid her just to make her stop showing up. He opened a drawer and handed me a receipt. Same fake logo, same handwriting, same scam. That was my proof it wasn't just me. She'd been doing this to everyone. Mrs. Caldwell down the street got fined for planting roses. The Hales got hit for painting their shutters. At least a dozen people all paying cash. It made me sick. But that night, staring at my pile of papers, I started doubting myself. What if I'd misunderstood something? What if there was some weird provisional HOA I'd missed in the paperwork? I sat there, shoulders heavy, wondering if maybe I should just let it go. It wasn't like I'd lost any money. Then I remembered her voice. "People who don't last long here." That wasn't a warning. It was a threat. And something in me clicked. I wasn't letting this go. I spent the next day verifying every law I could find. Tow companies in Illinois need a $1 million insurance policy, a commercial vehicle license, and a registered business ID. They had none. The county clerk confirmed in writing no HOA called Wellington Heights existed. I printed the email and pinned it above my desk. Karen had faked everything. 2 days later, she doubled down. Another notice appeared on my door. Final warning, $500. Fine. Cream-colored cardstock, fake watermark, same bogus letterhead. I walked outside, recording on my phone, and asked her directly, "When was the board meeting that approved this fine?" "Board meetings are confidential," she snapped. "No, they're not. They're public under Illinois law, except there is no board because there is no HOA. I held up the county email. "You're running a scam, Karen, and now I have proof." Her face froze, then flushed red. "You don't understand. This neighborhood needs order. People like you ruin things." "People like me," I said. "You mean people who read." She turned on her heel, but not before muttering, "This isn't over." That night I met with Vernon again, and by the end of the week we had a small army of angry neighbors, all with fake receipts, fake fines, fake notices. Mrs. Caldwell showed me 3 separate citations for rosebush violations. Preston Hale had text messages threatening a lien on his property. I compiled everything into one master file and called the police. The detective's name was Dalton. He sounded skeptical at first until I emailed him the evidence. 20 minutes later, he called back. "Mr. Hayes, this is one of the most organized frauds I've seen. We're opening an investigation." It took 2 weeks. 2 long, tense weeks of watching her stroll around the neighborhood with that clipboard pretending to be in charge. Then, one afternoon, 2 police cruisers rolled up to her house. I watched from my porch as Detective Dalton knocked on her door. She came out looking confused, then furious, insisting she was the HOA president and just doing her job. He said something showed his badge, and a minute later she was in handcuffs. She saw me watching. Our eyes met across the street. I didn't smile. I just nodded. For a moment the world felt right again, but it didn't last. A week later, envelopes started showing up in people's mailboxes, new letters, same HOA name. Only, this time they looked professional. Legal, language letterhead, board member names. It looked real enough to fool anyone. I checked the state database again, nothing. The board members were dead or fictional. She was still running the scam from jail. I sent everything to Dalton, and the news picked up the story. The headline read, "Fake HOA, President Continues Fraud from Custody." That's when things exploded. Cameras interviews neighbors talking to reporters. They called me the accountant who audited justice. Cute, but it didn't feel heroic. It felt exhausting. Then came the letters with my name on them. "You don't understand what you're interfering with. Back off." No signature, just block letters and threats. Dalton told me to install cameras and stay alert. I did. 3 of them. Motion sensors, floodlights, the whole setup. Then came the phone call. Mr. Hayes Dalton said she made bail. I stared out my window. Her house lights were on again. She was home. A week later, I learned she'd started it all over fake legal letters. New victims, even an official-looking Facebook page for the Wellington Heights HOA. Testimonials, mission statements, everything. It was propaganda. I decided enough was enough. That night, I called the reporter Lee Sullivan and told her everything. We organized a community meeting at the local center, cameras rolling, every neighbor packed inside. I stood at the front with a projector and laid it all out, fake incorporation documents, the UPS mailbox she used as an address, the phony lawyer emails, even a spreadsheet tracking every dollar she'd stolen. When I finished, I looked right into the camera and said, "One person can't just invent authority and demand obedience. Not in my neighborhood." The room erupted applause, relief, anger. People finally saw the pattern. Karen wasn't powerful anymore. She was exposed. The news segment aired that night. The next morning, the district attorney called. They were moving to revoke her bail for continuing the scam while under arrest. And 2 weeks later, the trial began. I sat in the second-row, notebook in hand, surrounded by the very people she'd bullied Vernon and Mrs. Caldwell the Hales. Karen looked smaller in that courtroom, stripped of her clipboard armor, wearing a navy blazer that didn't fool anyone. The prosecution was ruthless. They brought out the county records, the fake invoices, the bank statements, the testimonies. Then they called me. I told the jury how I'd found her lies, one line item at a time. How she'd built an empire of intimidation out of cheap paper and arrogance. How she'd looked me in the eye and said, "You won't last long here." When the verdict came, it was quick guilty on all counts: fraud, impersonation, extortion, identity theft. I watched her face when the judge said the words 24 months in state prison. She didn't cry. She just stared forward, jaw-tight, eyes cold, still believing she was right. And that's where it ended. No celebration, no victory speech, just silence as the bailiff led her away, clipboard finally out of her hands. Some people think justice is loud. I've learned it's quiet, like the sound of a tow chain unclipping from your car or a gavel striking wood, or the moment you realize you don't have to be scared of bullies pretending to be in charge. Because in the end, authority only works when people believe in it, and I stopped believing in her the moment she touched my car.